Welcome to another episode of Fresh Brewed Politics. I'm your host, Andrew Cooper, coming at you from a Fairfield Inn or Marriott. What are we in?
Marriott in Columbia, Tennessee.
We are in a Marriott in Columbia, Tennessee. We are down here for the Reorg food tour. I will be speaking at it tomorrow. So I am here today. We're coming at you live right before we go into a dinner. But hey, that doesn't stop the news from rolling in. And it's been real interesting. You know, one of the things I didn't know a lot of people didn't realize, kind of as some people join us, is, a lot of people don't really listen to both sides. As my roommate at this particular traveling producer, Nick, found out, I watched CNN, almost only CNN. And he asked me why. He said, Andrew, why do you only watch CNN? Why don't you watch some of the other stuff like Fox and things like that? Honest with you, I don't really care what people that I either agree with or mostly agree with or sometimes agree with per se think about the news, because I know that's the take I'm going to take away from the news. I actually watch CNN because I'm curious what they are taking. Weird, but I encourage you guys, seek out and find your news sources from many different sources, as many sources as you can, and not just ones you always agree with. Because if your ideas, if your thoughts are truly superior, then you can handle listening to people who disagree with you. And that's one thing we have to do better at on the right, is making sure we are engaging with others. But I thank you guys for joining me. As a reminder, Facebook is throttling us because they don't like our viewpoint. So please go ahead and hit that share button. Hashtag beat the algorithm. Hit that share button as many times as you can. If you're listening to this on a replay on YouTube or on Facebook, you can always listen to this as a podcast form. It's on Spotify and Apple and anywhere where you can find your podcast app. But we got a lot of things we're going to cover today. Here, let me pull up my show notes. Democracy under attack. That's been the major thing. January 6th is, of course, the Democrats' Benghazi, right? They're never going to stop trying to have hearings about it, except, Benghazi, Americans actually died, or more Americans died, but unfortunately, but they're not going to stop talking about it. They're going to keep pushing forward this idea that democracy is under attack. There's an interview coming up with Obama from Anderson Cooper on AC 360. And the promo for it is, them asking Obama, is democracy in danger? And I don't need to watch the interview to know how he answers. I know how he's going to answer. He's going to say, democracy is always one election away, and of course it's in danger, and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to talk about, is democracy under attack? Who's it under attack by? How's it look? We'll go into some of that. We'll talk about here in Kentucky, we're having Reorg coming up. And I know in a lot of places all across this country having Reorg of the Republican Party. Had an interesting occurrence in Kenton County, Kentucky. And you're going to hear more and more stories about this. And it is a lesson, I think, hopefully this is a lesson heard by GOP leadership. Because if you don't start reining in and starting to work with the liberty movement happening within your own party, you're going to be pushed out and left on the outs completely. You're not going to be a part of our victories. Because I tell you this much, we're in the majority. And you're finding that out. And if we weren't in the majority, you wouldn't need to play the games you're playing, like in Kenton County, to keep us out. And we'll talk about hypocritical woke companies such as North Face and Coke and Lululemon. And we'll kind of break down some of that stuff because I saw some interesting things. And it's just really interesting to hear these hypocritical companies. And it's worth talking about now, especially as we're going into Pride Month, where every single evil corporation that has no problem producing in China, where they literally put Uyghur Muslims into concentration camps, or do work with companies that or countries all across this nation that do things like literally throw LGBTQ people off a building, but yet because they changed their logo to a rainbow for 1 month, they're now a woke company, a company that you should buy your products from. And of course, that is simply because the left in general is very far easily played, and they're not as well informed as the right is. And I have some empirical evidence for you guys behind that. But let's go into it. Democracy under attack. That is the big line we're hearing from all of the amazing pundits on the left. Democracy is under attack. Literally, democracy is going to be destroyed. Now, guys, if you feel like you're in a little bit of a deja vu, it's because it is always this way. Democracy is always on their side of things under attack, because they're always worried that if the election doesn't go the way they want it to, then of course that's because democracy was completely under attack. And see, right now what they're dealing with is they're dealing with Republicans saying we recognize and want to roll back what is your actual some of these things you put in place during COVID. I'll give you a great example. There's this Time article, and I think it's understated. And if you haven't checked this article out, please do it. It's a Times article called "Inside the Shadow Campaign to Save the 2020 Election," and it's a story about mainly a bunch of leftists that came together for the 2020 campaign because of Donald Trump's misinformation and all the misinformation out there. They worked with social media. They worked with social media to suppress misinformation and to fight misinformation, which, of course, as we all know, that means they worked with social media to the point that they killed the Hunter Biden story that could have absolutely changed the outcome of our election. But also, too, as well, they sit there and they say, hey, well, you know, we want to work with social media on making sure lies, misinformation don't get out there. We want to work on changing voting laws and regulations to help more people vote. Now, you always say to yourself, Andrew, why is this controversial? I'm going to say the part nobody wants to say. I'm going to be honest, okay? Really honest. There are two types of people that vote for Democrats. Poorly informed voters, because all they know is they're going to get free stuff. And they're being promised their lives will get better. Because, you know, if I just tell you I'm going to give you cash, that tells you your life is going to get better. That doesn't mean your life is actually going to get better, especially if everybody else is also having free cash. Then at that point, you actually just have proportionally the same amount of money you had before, but, you know, let's put that to the side. There's another type, and that type is actually highly informed, and they're very informed. However, what they're informed about is they don't like the evils of society. They don't like the evils of humanity. And many times they have never struggled. All they know is they see somebody down the street that is struggling, and they don't know how to help them. And they don't want to come out and say, well, you know, I need to help them individually, because of course that would actually require them giving up something. You see, they're very well-informed people. They are well enough off, but they haven't actually struggled. And in order to help somebody, they don't know quite how to do it. And so they think they need to use government force. Well, if government could just make their life better. I mean, I have a house, why can't they have a house? Oh, I have this, why can't they have this, right? This is from the same people that think you cure homelessness by just giving them homes, which doesn't actually solve the problem. And so those are two types. They're well enough informed. They're very successful. One type, they just look at all the suffering going on and say, I don't want to take personal accountability and responsibility for it. I don't want to be forced to do something, but I want to still give myself those kudos. So I'm going to go ahead. And you'll see this from people. This is why you'll see some of the richest people in the nation, you know, Elon Musk included, Jeff Bezos, and for example, Facebook CEO.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg. You know, these types of people, it doesn't take luck. Or it takes some luck, I guess. Luck can help you. But just about everybody in the nation, with a lot of hard work and time, has the opportunity and ability on completely their own merits to make it to having a net worth of $1 million. I know a lot of you sitting there are like, no, that's not possible. I'm telling you, proper savings, proper hard work, things like that. There's a way, you have the opportunity to do it. Maybe that's not your goal. Maybe that's not something that's going to make you happy, and that's okay too, because this is America and you get to have your own choices. But the idea of America is you can work hard and be, well, we won't even say millionaire. well enough off, be able to take care of your family, put a roof over the head, food on the table, and you take pride in what you do and how you live, and you are proud of your accomplishments. Just about anybody can do that in America. That's the wonderful thing about America, American dream. That's why people immigrate here, is that simple idea. But to become worth 400 million, a billion, several billion, it doesn't just take intelligence. It does take a little bit of luck per se, right? Now, I don't, and I know a lot of you sit there and say, what are you saying there? I'm saying that, it doesn't take luck to become successful. It takes a little bit of luck to become extremely successful, because you got to bet it all on black and come out on top. You got to make some gambles, right? We all know that business owners are gambling when they start a business. That's part of the why we do what we do. And so when you have those individuals who've made it and they're worth so much money, they feel guilty. They feel guilty because they feel like, maybe rightly so, that they got lucky. And they don't understand why they're in the position they're in, like Elon Musk, who says a lot of socialist things, that they're in a position they're in and how they got there. And so they want their government to put forward policies. And this is why when it comes to, and this is where it becomes important, because under democracy under attack, when you read that 2020 fever pitch article, it's a very long article by Times that's into the shadow campaign to say the 2020 election. When you look into it, in there it has that Mark Zuckerberg donated to their efforts of facilitating and changing the election laws, as well as the way we handle ballots, making sure everything's funded, right? Because one of the things about changing to mail-in ballots and stuff is how's it going to be paid for? Because this isn't the way we normally vote. It hasn't been allocated in the budget. To these efforts, Mark Zuckerberg donated $300 million. Mark Zuckerberg donated to organizations that were also at the same time coming to him and asking him to quash things like the Hunter Biden story. $300 million. $300 million. Why? Why do they vote for these policies? Because they feel guilty. And also, at the end of the day, does it really hurt their pocketbook too much to give up some money? No, not as much. And also, as well, when you're the owner of these major corporations, sometimes you want this regulation. So you ask for this regulation to come in. It helps protect your market share from the smaller guys. For example, Starbucks would lobby for $15 an hour because they know coffee shops like ours we pay right around about $11, $12 after all said and done, can't afford, without raising our prices, to pay somebody $15 an hour. They also can't afford to pay people $15 an hour, keep their same profit margins without raising their prices. The difference is they move far more volume than small local shops do, so the price raise can be small, 5 cents, 10 cents, unnoticed, especially when all the other coffee shops in the area that are locally owned are going up by $1, $2 in their cost. It gains them market share. That's why these companies also support those things. So why are they interested in getting out the vote? Well, I told you about the one type of person that votes for Democrats. Well enough intentioned. However, they have never struggled, so they don't understand it. It's why it's really hard for the Democrats to understand why the blue-collar workers, the middle class, and the upper lower class, the workers like us, why we continue to vote for people like Donald Trump, like the Republicans, because they've never struggled. They don't understand what we do, which is if the government can just get out of our way, we can be successful on our own. Everybody can be successful on their own if government can just get out of our way. So the other type of person that votes for them are typically the uninformed voters. These are not dumb people. They're not dumb. I want to be very clear. They're uninformed. And uninformed voters don't come out to vote if it's hard to vote. They know that. Democrats know that. That's why they do get out the vote campaigns. That's why they do things like souls to the polls, things like that, because they're worried about uninformed voters that all they know is hey, I'm going to get my stimmy check from the government. Hey, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get that free money in. Hey, I'm not going to have to pay for health care. I don't have to worry about that. That's all they know. They haven't actually paid attention to the science and the studies and the economics behind these policies. All they know is they believe, based upon the surface information, that it is good for them. But they're not well enough informed and dedicated enough to voting that they're willing to go through much trouble to go out. That's why if you even look at the voter registrations in states like Kentucky and you look at it by House districts, you'll see House districts where Republicans are winning by 75%, but the registration numbers are plus D by like 1,000 more registrants. 5,000 more registered Democrats over Republicans, but yet they're winning by 75%. Because typically a big chunk of the Democratic voting base is actually an uninformed voter that doesn't understand their economic policies. And if it's too difficult to go vote, they just won't. And there's some thought process that goes into it. And should we make it hard to vote? And a lot of people would say, well, no, you shouldn't make it hard to vote. It should be the easiest thing in the world to vote, right? You're wrong. I know that sounds hard to hear. You're like, what are you talking about, Andrew? You're saying it's good that it's sometimes difficult to vote? Yes, it is. It is a guard to make sure you're informed voters. Our founding fathers believed so much in being worried about people miselecting a person because they understood the idea that a person can just come along and say, well, I'm just going to make the government as big as I can. Just cut you guys checks if you elect me, which is what happened in 2020 to a degree. A lot of people elected Biden because they won their money. They won their stimulus check. And so because of this, they put in things like the Electoral College. I mean, the Electoral College existed for a couple reasons. One is to, of course, help make it more equal to the states themselves, where one state wasn't telling another state what to do. Another part of the reason was logistics. It is hard when you have a nation that is not connected by technology to get together a vote total in a reasonable amount of time, right? So rather you have the vote and then you send the messengers with the election results, or you send your Electoral College to the place where they all cast their votes, right? Report back how they voted. But also as well, the founding fathers were worried about uneducated voters picking somebody who can manipulate them. That was a worry. That's why the Electoral College can actually choose somebody different than who they were sent to actually vote for. There's that provision that they can do it. It doesn't often happen, and many times, if I believe it's happened like one time before, 2 times before, where an elector has picked something different and then they got sued or something, right?
One of them was an accident.
One of them was an accident, right? So it doesn't happen really, but it was put in place to begin with to make sure that that isn't what occurs. So, of course, the Democrats want to keep in place all these mail-by votes. And then there's another reason, obviously. There is easy fraud. It is. It simply is. If I'm mailing out ballots and you just mail them back with a person's name wrote at the top, checked off, and they don't even got to provide you an ID number, social security number, any kind of identifying factor that you know that individual is that individual who's casting that vote, it's very easy. It's very easy for me to collect up ballots and send them in. And no matter where you are, left, right, or center, you cannot look me in the eye and tell me not at least one person in this entire country did not find or get mailed a couple of ballots and mailed them all back in under different names. We all know it has happened at least once, if not more than once. And for that reason, asking for an ID makes a lot of sense. After all, as the Democrats sit here and say democracy is under attack, and we need a January 6th investigation to make sure our democracy is saved. But yet, if I ask for an ID to match your vote, I'm racist. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? When we need a January 6th investigation commission because democracy. But if I require to verify you are who you are when you cast a ballot to make sure that every vote is counted for every person that casts a ballot one time, and you're against that. That seems pretty inconsistent to me. So naturally, what it really is the Democrats want to keep the 2020 voting measures in place. What the Republicans are putting in place now in many of these states are actually, in fact, less restrictive voting measures than it was in 2018, than it was in 2016, than it was in 2014, and so on and so forth, where people, they won. I mean, in 2012, right? Obama won. They had no problem with the results of that, did they? They weren't worried about the results of their election. They weren't sitting there saying, well, we need to do more. We need to roll back, progress forward our voting rolls. And so what it really is all these things that this Times article talks about, Mark Zuckerberg donated $300 million to get done, is being rolled back by Republicans because they're saying, no, this maybe was done for a pandemic, but this cannot normally continue. It's too hard, too difficult, and too liable to have fraud involved. It's too easy, because the easier it is to vote, the more likely there is to be fraud in place. So they're trying to strike a balance, and they're actually passing laws that extend early voting, that allow more early in-person voting, that allow longer times to mail in ballots, loosen the restrictions on who can mail in a ballot. All they're requiring is an ID or social security number to send it in. And the Democrats are calling it destruction of democracy. And then playing into that by grabbing onto the January 6th commission, saying we need to have the January 6th commission because if we don't, democracy will be under attack. So they're mad about it. And they're even more mad about the audit going on in Arizona. For those of you who are unaware, there's an audit going on in Arizona that the left has coined fraudit. That's right. The election, no fraud. The audit of the election, fraud, according to the Democrats, right? It's funny because you watch them sit there and try to take apart this audit that's going on. And the things they're claiming are the exact same things that were generally claimed in those exact elections by people who are saying fraud existed. So they're tearing apart Arizona. They preemptively have released a report on all these issues going on in Arizona. They preemptively, the Secretary of State there, preemptively released the thing, because if it comes out that there is even a little bit of fraud in that, it is giving base to the idea, giving credence to the idea that we need to go ahead and audit the rest of our elections. And if we find fraud, and if we find bad mail-in ballots, even if it's not enough to make a difference in the presidential election in 2020, the fact it exists at all is evidence why the Republicans needed to pass these voting changing laws. Democrats can't have that, now can they? And they're going as far as to compare Mexico's deadly primary to American politics. I'm not, if I'm lying, I am dying, let me tell you. The Democrats have decided that they're mad. And in Mexico right now, there's a primary going on. And a lot of people are dying. Political opponents are just being killed. Okay, just like you're donezo. And not in the same way that Tulsi Gabbard killed Kamala Harris presidential run. They're just literally being killed. And remember, guys, what I said earlier is I actually watch CNN often because I'm interested to see how they're spinning these things. And they compared Mexico's literally murdering opponents to exactly the same way we do politics in America and exactly how Trump works. And this constant degrading of America in this way and comparing American elections and how they're in such trouble the same way that Mexico's are, where people are literally being killed for being political opponents. Not only is it extreme hyperbole, but also as well, it is painting our country in such a negative light that in a way the Democrats are just giving places like China and Russia more ammunition to use against us in our fight against them. They actually think we have no legs to stand up. And you can tell they think that when they're sitting there comparing Mexico literally killing political opponents to a normal election in America. But that's what we're dealing with here. So is our democracy under attack? It is. It's under attack actually by the Democrats, who to them, their version of democracy means we are playing by only their rules. Not, of course, a proper process for the rules. For an example, a democratically elected state legislator that is then using their voting process to vote forward democratic-like bills and laws, including those changing the election rules. So, of course, not from the Republicans, but from the Democrats that take the very actions that democracy allows you to do as being something that is somehow unthinkable. On to Reorg. Real quick, guys, if you're watching this, go ahead, hit the share button, share it out there. I don't know how many people are watching. Normally, I got a little display. It tells me how many people are watching, but because we're in the old hotel here, I am not privy to that information. So hopefully I have tons of people watching, or maybe nobody's watching. And if nobody's watching, then, I don't know. Such is life, I guess. Such is life. How many we got watching over there?
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Okay. Probably not a lot. Who knows? It's a random time. 4 o'clock on a Friday is the worst time ever to do a podcast. I hear you. I forgot we were an hour behind.
Oh.
I forgot we were an hour behind. We're 4:40. So anyways, going into it, though, we had Kenton County reorg issues going on. Let's see here. Kenton County reorg. So what came up was, as it's being reported to me, I was not there. I had friends who were there. And so they're reporting to me that what happened at the Kenton County reorg. Now, for those who are unaware, reorg is a process that's going around the Republican Party right now. And that process happens every 4 years with the presidential election. And basically what occurs there is that every position becomes available in the Republican Party. This happens in the Democrat Party too. Like it's turned down to the precinct level. Now, every county has a different amount of precincts. So like some precincts have like 12 precincts, and some places like Fayette County have like 230 precincts. So we have a lot of precincts. And what happens in these precincts is you come together. So on one day, you have a reorg meeting where people come together and they vote. Any registered Republican can do this. And they vote on a precinct captain, co-captain, and youth chair. Okay, so those three. Then those three precinct positions come forward. And at that point, they vote. Now, this is kind of where it gets different by county, but in Fayette County, they vote for what's called the executive committee, which is a group of about, I think there's like 49 seats. And they vote for who's on those seats, that slate of candidates who's on the slate. Then that executive committee there votes on who's to be chair, vice chair, youth chair, secretary, treasurer, and so forth. And then the ex-com there, the chair and I believe vice chair and youth chair, then go to the state convention. And then they vote on those same positions at the state level and the executive committee for the state level. And the Republican Party, of course, the establishment is trying to hold control of the party. And so we have some local GOP corruption going on here. So let's go over it. In Kenton County, what they did is a bunch of constitutionalist groups like Moffat, Tea Party groups, Constitutional Kentucky, a lot of groups that maybe some of you are familiar with. I know I am. I work with a lot of them. And so they came together and they went to the reorganization and they turned out the establishment by law. So what did the establishment do? Well, the chair, which I'm not going to call out his name, I'm sure the media will, called the meeting to order and took a nomination, and this is being reported to me, I wasn't there, nomination of a slate for the county executive committee. Okay. And he took that slate from only someone who shared his preferred slate. And he asked for those in favor of that slate of candidates. But he did not ask for those opposed. Declared the motion carried, and then refused to recognize those calling for an appeal, or those calling for a division or raise of hands. So this is what happened. Imagine I invite you to a meeting. It's supposed to be a meeting where we're all voting on who's leading this party. And you put forward what's called a slate, which is a group of candidates being nominated for each position. Somebody seconds that slate. Then I say, okay, now who is in favor of this slate? People vote. I am, whatever. They vote by, apparently here they voted by audio or raise a hand. Raise of hands. Voted by raise of hands, apparently it looks like. And that was it. He never asked who opposed to it. He has no idea if that slate really passed or not. And then he never asked to oppose, and he never let it carry through. And apparently things got pretty nasty. Things got so nasty at one point, I guess, that a state representative engaged in some pretty inappropriate conduct towards one of the leaders of the Constitutionalist, the Liberty Movement here in Kentucky. That state representative is Kim Mosier, who has always been a garbage state representative to begin with, to the point that I would literally, if I lived in Kenton County, would vote for a dog before I voted for Kim Mosier. I would literally vote for no one. I would literally, if it was only that election, you guys know how involved in politics I am, I would literally not show up. Terrible representative. And of course gets upset. Why? Well, if Liberty takes over her party, she's out. Why? Not for liberty. Authoritarian right, for big government, for compromising away your rights. Can't hold on to her seat correctly, so of course they're trying this shenanigans. But apparently some major news outlets are getting a hold of this, and it should be broke pretty quickly. But I tell you what, Republican Party, if you're going to keep these shenanigans up, I suggest you quickly find a new way forward. You're going to have a lot of issues for sure. All right, going in, final kind of thing here. Hypocritical woke companies. I saw something funny the other day. Somebody showed it to me, and it was a billboard about a North Face, And the billboard, so apparently North Face is doing this campaign about how terrible fossil fuels are. So apparently the fossil fuel companies came together and launched their own campaign because they're putting millions of dollars into how terrible fossil fuels are. So they launched their own campaign calling out North Face for the hypocriticalness, which I find hilarious. Because, of course, we all know North Face relies on fossil fuels quite a bit, whether it's through trucking, shipping, what have you. They have a very, very big problem with it. And so these woke companies, like North Face, are being caught being very hypocritical. Take Coca Cola, right? How they feel, of course, they coming out against voting rights, and IDs, while requiring IDs themselves to buy tickets to like their factory tours and things like that. Lululemon coming out with the anti-capitalism line while engaging in capitalism. I mean, guys, I cannot write these things. They literally occur. But going back to what I originally said, you know, people on the left are kind of easily bought a lot of times. They're easily bought by simple things like throwing up a rainbow profile picture or a rainbow on a shirt, or saying I'm against fossil fuels while I use so much of it, or saying I'm against capitalism while engaging in capitalism to sell you t-shirts. I don't know. It's just pretty hypocritical, and it reminds everybody that Brood was not the first company to get into politics at all. Well, I thank you guys for joining us today. Please once again share us out, support us, buy our coffee, broodco.com. I thank you guys for joining us. Thank you so much. Have a great